What takes somebody from a rare heart disease to losing over 120 pounds? What takes somebody from being disabled to being a vibrant leader in the plant-based and vegan community? Today, my guest is Kate McGoey-Smith. Kate has a phenomenal story where she's going to share with you how she went from a life where she was desperate, she was in pain, she was ill, to where now she's a leader in the community. Welcome to Kate McGoey-Smith. All right. Well, Kate, I am so thrilled that you're here, and I'm curious. Tell us about your journey into plant-based eating. When did you start? What motivated you? And tell us your incredible story.
Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me. And I know that your listening audience is both entrepreneurs and people who have a strong, maybe curious to committed interest in plant-based lifestyle. So my journey began, I was a very busy mother of three. My position was to start free on-site counseling program for an entire rural school board. So we were in lots of different communities, and I literally started with blank paper, and I started a counseling program in which we served kids from kindergarten to grade 12. And by the time I ended up getting sick and having to go on leave, it was sort of 6.5 years later, I was supervising 12 counselors in 13 school sites.
Wow.
So very busy.
Okay. And now I know that you have a pretty phenomenal story of when you started eating plant-based to where you're at now. And you mentioned you were sick. You were really sick. So tell us about that.
I was. I noticed that I was getting some lower leg swelling and some abdominal swelling, and I was getting more and more fatigued. My husband, Andrew, always referred to me as the Energizer Bunny. And yet I felt like one of my batteries had been gone missing for quite a while. Because I looked forward to every day. It was like working in an emergency room. You never knew what was going to happen. We had to deal, unfortunately, with risk of suicide, all sorts of, domestic violence issues, drugs, just normal, unfortunately, not so welcome issues of bullying and things like that. So very busy. And so I noticed I was getting more fatigued. I couldn't dress as quickly, and I was just sort of taking more of my time, and it was very unusual. And it progressed to the point where I was coming home and I was getting in my pajamas and in bed before the kids were going to bed. And I had school age to junior high kids at the time. I have 3 children altogether, a girl and 2 boys. And so I, became alarmed, and I finally went to urgent care, which is like a mini emergency room in the community. And that's when they discovered that I had type 2 diabetes. Ooh. And I'm a former registered nurse, and I felt kind of badly that I didn't recognize that. But I realized that the symptoms of fatigue, particularly, you put down to just being a busy mother and that kind of thing. So I was given a couple of weeks off to kind of get my health in order and get on track for that. But at the same time, they discovered that there was a problem with my heart, and that required further investigation. And then upon investigation, what they discovered is I had severe right-sided heart failure. And I first saw one of the specialists was, I have had 5 specialists in my life, and one of them was a sleep specialist, and in which they discovered that I had severe sleep apnea. And in the process of doing that, I was re-examined about 3 months later in a sleep clinic overnight. And that's when I was given the diagnosis of idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension. Idiopathic, I say, even the idiots don't know what caused it or could cure it. And pulmonary arterial hypertension as soon as people think of hypertension, they think of high blood pressure.
Right.
Well, that's high blood pressure in the overall body. This is particular high blood pressure just localized in the arteries of the lungs. And unfortunately, what you have actually is very low blood pressure overall in your body. You might have 90 over 50, 100 over 60 kind of thing. And so you're subject to fainting and dizziness. You're not getting enough oxygen. Your body's compromised enough that you're not getting enough fresh oxygen. It's been depleted, and that causes the problems. So this is a very rare disease. It only affects 2 to 4 in a million.
Wow.
And it has no cure, and they don't know the cause of it as well. And for women who get it, it's life-threatening should they become pregnant, for example. They will not make it through the pregnancy just because of the high blood volume that's necessary during the gestation of the baby. So, you know, it's a really life-changing situation almost immediately.
Well, I remember the article I read about you that really motivated me to reach out to you. There was a picture of your before and a picture of your after, and there was a substantial weight release. I don't like to call it weight loss because we tend to look for what we lost. And so you released a lot of weight.
I never want to find that again.
Yeah, we don't want to find that stuff. But I believe it was 120 pounds. You were on an oxygen machine.
Yeah. Within months, I was on oxygen 24 hours a day.
Wow.
So it was, if you could imagine carrying a tank, I was like a scuba diver on land.
Wow.
Because the usual little carts that they have with oxygen aren't those wonderful golfing carts that people see that are ergonomically correct. These, if a little pebble is even in the way, it twists and turns your arm, you know, all the way around. Unfortunately, people with disability don't get the perks that people with money and golf carts do.
Absolutely.
So I ended up figuring out a device where I had a sort of a mini knapsack that I could put my oxygen tank in.
Incredible.
And then I had what I call the plastic mustache. And unfortunately, you know, most women by the time, and probably men as well, but I think women in particular find it difficult because we are very appearance oriented.
Right.
Is that plastic mustache ends up isolating them more. They don't want to go out in the community, stared at, looked at. I know that even myself, when I went out in the community, I don't know if people thought somehow that, I should say, I want to add right here, within months as well, I not only found out that I was in need of oxygen, but I also found that I wasn't getting enough oxygen to my eyes. And so I ended up being, with that combined with diabetic retinopathy, I ended up being blind.
Wow.
So if you can imagine if you were brushing your teeth in the vanity mirror and how close you are, I could not see, for example, my mouth. I would just see this huge black hole. And I'd be like someone, you know, trying to be under the influence, trying to find out where my mouth was to brush my teeth. Or on a bright day, I could open the door. I would have no idea. I would just see a bright light. I would not have an idea if it was a child, a dog, a person with a gun, knife, whatever. You know,
that's incredible.
Any idea who they were until they started speaking.
So how long ago was that you were?
I was officially diagnosed because they do a right heart catheterization while you're awake in the operating room. And I was diagnosed December 20th, 2012.
So it really wasn't that
2007,
long ago.
I should say. 2007,
Okay.
I apologize.
So about 11 and a half, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. And
sleep specialist gave me the news that I had this disease. I was in the waiting room and she said, I don't know how you've been able to function because your pressures are so high in your arteries that like it's amazing that you're just standing. She said, you only have 2 to 5 years to live. 2 years to live without treatment and 5 years to live with treatment. What she didn't tell me at the time was the treatment was highly toxic chemical drugs to use. and that all it did was it was going to slow the progression of the disease.
And weren't you going to be in line for a lung transplant, as I recall the
Yes,
story?
eventually what happens is because drugs are just slowing down, trying to slow the progression of it, they're very experimental. In fact, a recent symposium here about a year ago at our center, and our center covers all of the lower part of our province in Alberta, but also the province next door. So people actually have to travel to come because of the rarity of the disease. And the doctor there said, the pulmonologist said that this is like the worst form of cancer you could ever imagine.
Wow.
So, I mean, and everybody's just kind of like, all you could hear is the oxygen machines going on and on. Yeah. And he said, I don't bother putting stats on past 5 years because no one makes it past 5 years.
Now that was 12 years ago, and here you are. You've dropped 120 pounds, released it. You're out there doing some amazing things in the plant-based community, which, you know, it's kind of interesting because when we were talking about setting this interview up, we decided at 2:00 on a Friday afternoon, and you commented, you go, never would have been like that in the past because by 2:00 on Friday, you're done, you're exhausted, you're ready to go to bed. And both of us really acknowledged that since going plant-based, our energy is consistent throughout the day, which, you know, you're doing some really amazing things. And I want to get into that, but I want to find out what was the trigger for you to realize plant-based eating was the direction to go?
Well, it actually started, we have someone, you know how you have your David Lettermans and Stephen Colbert's. Well, we had a gentleman up here called George Strophanopoulos, a younger fellow who came on one night. He's on the Canadian Broadcasting, and he is an interviewer. One night, I just happened to turn on the TV. Now, you got to understand, when I watched, first time I ever heard of Stephen Colbert, I didn't know there was because we had a big screen TV, because I could not even, when I went to try to even read a book, by the time I could try to see some words, I couldn't figure out the whole sentence after the end. I was like a grade oneer. By the time I got to the end of the sentence, I couldn't remember what the beginning was. It took so long. So a TV became at least like a radio for me. And so when I happened just to turn it on, and I think higher powers were helping me, because George Strophanopoulos came and I heard his voice. And he started his broadcast by saying, I've seen a documentary called Forks Over Knives. It changed my life. It might change yours. That's all I'm going to say. Well, that's enough for someone like me. I am such a curious person. I love learning. So I was in the process. I had won a grant through the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, because it's a very expensive program. It's voice automated, and I couldn't just not afford it. But what I wanted to do, my goal was, with the time I had left, is to write goodbye stories to my children, because I had helped for, you know, so many years, teenagers and everybody else, as a family therapist, that I really felt I wanted to leave my children with some parting ideas and hopefully some wisdoms for them to continue on their life, because the thought that I would never see them have a boyfriend or girlfriend, get married or have grandchildren or graduate from high school even was or grade school was not even possible. So I got on the computer and I found out Forks Over Knives, and I wrote to the producers and asked when it might be possibly coming to Calgary, Alberta. And they said, well, we'll let you know. And it took, I guess, about a year later or so. And it was shown at sort of an avant-garde theater, which, you know, means that, you know, it's the theater, you know, one at a time kind of thing, for them to see it as well. Because my husband and I sat there, and probably the most moving part was when Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn of the Cleveland Clinic shared, he has written a book, groundbreaking book on preventing and reversing heart disease. And he shared how it's so important with the endothelium cells to repair them, that by the time someone's 45 or 50, they're already quite destroyed and that they need to be repaired, and that the blood is sticky and you want it to not flow like molasses, but like water. And so that we all produce plaque naturally. We produce cholesterol naturally. We don't need to add to it by having any oils. So, and animal products, unfortunately, are very high in fat.
Right.
Like chicken, beef, 70%. People don't realize salmon is 50% fat, for example. So those kind of adding to it. So not only do we naturally produce cholesterol and plaque is going through our bloodstream, but we don't want this plaque to be clogged up and sticky like Velcro, so it adheres. And so what happens is what was normally a nice open artery is getting closed more and more. So with my disease, I had just heard a lecture from the pulmonologists that were leaders in our area and specialists in this disease, said that it's the thickening of the endothelium cells. They don't know why they thicken, but that's partly what happens. So I could imagine now all of a sudden, if I'm going to follow the standard American diet and I'm going to naturally, unfortunately, the consequence will be to have my further restriction of my arteries. Can you imagine then having on top of that pulmonary arterial hypertension that's already thickening it? So, you know, you just, in other words, squeezed out of life and air and being able to function. And that's, I thought, it was just like a aha moment. My husband is a PhD in chemistry, and he's an environmental risk assessment consultant. And we sort of really explored that. And we said, this makes sense. There's science behind this, hardcore, true evidence science, not just a fad or a trend.
Right.
And that's what really sold us to say, we're going to do this. What I also remember is Caldwell-Esselstyn talking about there is no morbidity to this way of eating. So in other words, you're not going to do harm to yourself. It's not going to cause you to die or get harmed. For example, like the paleo diet, unfortunately, in very fine print, I had the opportunity to study it through Cornell University, T. Colin Campbell's plant-based nutrition program. Very fine print. It says, if you have kidney problems, you should not be following this.
Wow.
And in fact, nephrologists are now finding they're having people in their 30s with end-stage kidney failure because of the paleo diet. That's what they're, because
that's amazing.
You're being hit with fatty liver disease, high cholesterol, and then your kidneys are affected.
Right. So is your husband plant-based?
Yes, absolutely, all the way.
Okay, and what have been some of his results? You've dropped 120, you've reversed a lot of your diseases.
He's lost weight as well. I can't off the top of my head figure out, I can hug him a lot easier. That's my measurement. That's my circumference measurement.
That's great.
He has a whole family history of type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
And now it's under control and manageable, and he's doing really well and feeling good. And he's off cholesterol medication and all that kind of good stuff.
So let's talk about where you're at today. It's night and day from where you were at. What's an average day for Kate today?
Well, an average day is getting up and having breakfast. And my breakfast is, I really believe that meal plans should be sort of automatic pilot, but eating should be mindful. So,
nice.
If we think about meal plans in the sense that, for breakfast, it's oatmeal for me and blueberries. Now, I don't like porridge. So it's also good to face reality of what you reach a certain age, what you don't want, you're never going to eat. You just know that. So my husband loves porridge. I don't. But I found a solution because, as Dr. Esselstyn says, oatmeal is dose responsive. That is, the more you eat it, the more effective it will be for example, lowering cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, and I love oatmeal cookies, but that's not the best form to have oatmeal.
Right.
So I went, how can I do this? So what I do is I take large flake oats. I prefer Quaker myself. I just find the flavors better. And then I take a cup of frozen blueberries.
Mm-hmm.
And I put the two together in the microwave. And the blueberries, I don't even add any milk or sugar or anything. And the blueberries all sort of get a little bit melty and juicy. and it's a nice warm, it just tastes so good. You know, that would be like a great candy bar for me.
And what about throughout the day? What are some of the activities that you're involved with?
Throughout the day, I exercise up to an hour a day on what's called a new step, which is resistance exercise that I got it when I was blind because, of course, being on a treadmill, I did try to go on a treadmill when I was blind, and I accidentally pressed the wrong button and I went flying.
Ooh,
I said, oh, if only there was a camera.
I know, that would have gone viral all over the place.
Like,
not necessarily what you want to go viral, you know? But, that's funny.
You have to have a sense of humor when you have disabilities, I'll tell you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I will do up to an hour a day. I'll sometimes break it up into half-hour portions or whatever. And I find that really feels great for my circulation, because we do have, I still have this disease.
Right.
It's actually been reversed from, there's 4 levels according to the World Health Organization, and I was at 3 to 3.5, and I'm down to a 1.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. That's incredible.
And so, and I write. I do forksmart.org is my site. Because
you have a phenomenal site.
It's really a gratitude project.
Right, right.
Has been, and so I write articles. I'm particularly interested because of my background as a former nurse, and I have my master's in clinical social work, and have been a family therapist for over 25 years. I'm particularly interested in the social and psychological aspects of this lifestyle.
Interesting.
Helping people, how do they connect? I think it's one thing that's kind of on the weaker side. It hasn't been fully developed yet. Doug Lyle does a great job in helping people get new understandings about when they're approaching new habits.
Right.
And I think, though, that a lot of the doctors sort of overlook the whole social aspect of it, and the intimidation sometimes of how to talk to other people or how to connect with other people, because food is very central to so many things we do.
Absolutely.
Certainly a source of fuel for us, but it also means connection with culture, with company, with comfort, so many things. So it's how do we be able to manage that? And how do we make those psychological changes as well?
Well, on the social aspect, I know you've been doing some pretty amazing things. And one, I do recommend people go to forksmart.com. You're an excellent writer. I love reading your articles. So I as a writer, I want to commend you on what you're doing there. And you have a summit coming up in Calgary. Tell us about that.
Well, that started out in 2017. I was so grateful to Dr. Caldwell-Esselstyn. I've always taught my kids that you can ask for anything as long as you do it respectfully and accept no respectfully as well.
Right.
And so I decided to write Dr. Esselstyn when I found out that he would hear from anybody with heart particular problems. And with me having severe right-sided heart failure, which is now gone, that's
so exciting.
Yeah, I'm right-sided now.
Okay, you're balanced.
Yeah. I wrote to him, and within 2 days, his secretary wrote me back and said, he wants your phone number. He wants to talk to you. And it was just as if someone said the Pope or the Beatles called.
Absolutely.
I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I could hardly wait. I was just, and that's a pretty risky thing when you're short of oxygen to be screaming at the top of your lungs, but I was thrilled. And so honestly, I've worked in the operating rooms, so I'm used to, he's a surgeon. He used to be head of breast cancer task force. And that's what led him into, in his heading toward retirement years, he wanted to make a change. And that's what made him decide he wanted to go into look at heart disease. Felt that was a possibility of having more likely to be able to solve those problems than, let's say, cancer and other areas.
Right.
And so when he talked to me, he was just he's very forthright. He's just like, hey, this is what you need to do. Just like a doctor giving an order, like, do these things, and this will help. And he found my situation very interesting. And he said that what I needed to do is at least eat greens. I wanted to increase my nitric oxide. And nitric oxide was the scientists that discovered the gas nitric oxide in our bodies were given the Nobel Prize in science in the late 1980s. And because nitric oxide is, when we go up and down the stairs, that's nitric oxide pumping our blood vessels in our legs to constrict and dilate back and forth, to give us that pumping motion to get up the stairs. And so that really helps in the healing of our endothelium cells as well. So I eat greens up to 6 times a day, steamed greens, about a cupful or a fistful, as Dr. Esselstyn would say. And I actually just put them in the microwave rather than get out a pot and everything else. I'm a super practical person. It's like, can I do this anywhere in the world? And when I went down to the Cleveland Clinic, I had the opportunity to sit in on Jane Esselstyn's workshop.
Wow.
And I'm sitting beside Dr. Esselstyn for lunch, and I pull out my little box. They had a beautiful oil-free, whole plant-based meal. And I pull out my little box, and he goes, "Hey, what's that?" And I said, "That's my steamed greens." And he went, "Oh, wow. You really do."
That's awesome. So with the summit, does he speak at your summit?
He came in 2017.
Wow.
And he came with his wife, Anne, who is just like an amazing, amazing woman.
Right.
And she did a cooking demonstration, and we had a wonderful evening with them. Packed house. We had people from the States, from different parts of Canada, right from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so that started as a gratitude project. And we had such a good response that I've done it. I did it last year again. We had Dr. Lim, who is medical director.
I love Dr. Lim.
He's wonderful. I think he's really, to be honest, I think a lot of people didn't know about Dr. Lim because he's just sort of on the cutting edge of being introduced to the whole community in a way. And he also works at True North Health Center as well. But he is a very, very excellent speaker and dynamic. And he was very impressed with our summit last year. He said he decided to stay for the entire summit.
Nice.
And said, wow, he said, this really matches anything I've seen. So
that's great.
I'm really pleased. And this year we have 3 huge big speakers. We've got Dr. David Jenkins, who's an MD with 2 PhDs. He's at University of Toronto. He created the glycemic index that is used by all over the world now.
Okay.
And he's been made the Order of Canada. He's a very dynamic speaker. And he's got his own personal interesting story of going from being vegetarian as a young teen to now being vegan, and seeing how it can help sustain us in our environmental issues in the world and feed the world as well. Excellent. And when is the summit? The summit is Saturday, May 11th. Okay. At Calgary. And, and the tickets people are saying are very affordable. They're very, tell us how much they are, because I was like, is there a typo? Yeah, we have a basic, plus, and an ultimate. And the basic, I think, is like $119, but we have a special right now for $10 off. And then it goes up from there to $149 for the plus. The plus allows for a private reception as well. Okay. And how do people find out more about that? They can go to forksmartsummit.org. Okay. I'm writing that down, because I'm going to put links down below in the description so that people can easily access your information. Yeah. And you can even send, when you go to forksmartsummit.org, you can actually press and put it on your own Facebook page. You can send it by email to other people. Because the sad part is when people don't know that this is available. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on to the show, because I really seriously discovered plant-based about 5 months ago, just shy of 5 months. And the changes I've seen in that short a period of time have been phenomenal. It's not only have I released 30 pounds without dieting. I mean, this is really interesting, because my focus was on inflammation.
and I'm a writer, and to get inflammation so bad in my wrist I couldn't work. That was pretty bad. And so I started with that, noticed my energy was increasing, that afternoon dip was gone, my headaches are gone. I mean, so many different things that I didn't even realize were wrong with me. And then I went for my annual, and my doctor was like, you keep doing what you're doing because these are the best numbers that I've seen in ages. And I'm going to be 65 in a few months. And it's like, you know, I feel great for soon to be on Medicare. It's like, yeah. And even got a picture with my doctor doing thumbs up. But I'm so committed to bringing as many people to my community as possible that are doing incredible things, that have had life-changing experiences like yourself. And now, do you consult with people and coach with people?
Yes,
what do you do?
I have people, I've consulted with people in Ireland, Singapore, all sorts throughout the United States and in Canada. So I can do that by phone, by Skype, even, you know, whatever. And I offer a 30-minute free consultation for
Excellent.
Just to check in and see what people are looking for.
And
but a solution-focused approach. So I build on a model of strengths that people have.
Great. Okay.
And we look for times when things are going well, and how do we build on that, and be able to come up with collaboratively some solutions that are both practical and, you know, doable for people.
Absolutely. And who would be, if you will, because I'm in marketing, and so I always want to identify who's the sweet spot client, who's the ideal client, who would really benefit from working with you, Kate?
I think, you know, I think it could be a client that's just even plant curious.
Okay.
To plant committed. One factor that they all have to have is they have to be willing to put on the researcher's hat. You know, because we don't know what kind of a fit something is until we kind of put that hat on as a researcher and say, I'm going to give this a try. For example, when I went down to the McDougall program, at one point he had, before he entered doing the 3-day program, he had a 5-day program, and I was fortunate enough to go to that. It was in my price point, and I was really excited to give that a try. And I found it really interesting. He said, like, don't give it just 30 days, like give it a reasonable amount of time so you can really see the changes.
Right.
Like anything else, when we're in the trees, it's really hard to notice what the differences are. We get it's amazing how quickly we get used to something.
Right.
And we know that because if we get a cold and we have a miserable cold, we've forgotten how much we've taken our health, our normal non-cold health for granted until we get that cold. It's a little bit like sometimes we treat health like the street lamps. You know, we're driving along and all the street lamps are lit, everything's fine. We don't think anything of it. We don't think to thank them or anything. Of course they're there. All of a sudden, when one's blowing out or two blowing out, or there's a pothole, we start cursing how could they, da 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 da. And that's kind of what we do with our health. We just sort of think it should be like just on automatic pilot, doesn't need any maintenance, no care. We would never do that about a car.
Right.
We never do that about our children. We know they need new shoes and clothes at different times as they, get older. But somehow we do that with our health. We end up, so I kind of have, what I like to do is tell people about, having self-love solutions for rewriting your relationship with yourself, others, and food. So that, you can really, because we don't need to be bogged down. Disease is a horrible bully in people's lives.
Yes, yes.
And we sort of minimize that as adults. We don't when children. We give them beads. We give them acknowledgement for their pain and suffering in some way, but we don't for adults. And
right.
All we have to do is, I know there are a lot of people who care, for example, about animals because it's outside ourselves. We can see their pain or suffering and their vulnerability. But I would suggest every single person, if you ever doubt health, go and walk along a hospital corridor and see real suffering.
Yeah.
Because it's an eye-opener that, if you felt sorry for animals, you'll feel equally, if not more, sorry for human beings.
Right, right.
Because they're just as deserving of that attention.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And, it's quite a shock. And we, even though we have ads on television that tell all the side effects of a drug, we think, well, that magic pill or procedure will just cure everything. What we forget is that, guess what? There are horrible side effects to those drugs. And
Absolutely.
I'm dealing with the side effect of the very toxic drugs that I was on to help save my life, prolong my life.
Right.
Has left me with end-stage kidney failure.
Oh, geez. That's amazing.
But the good news is, I've talked to Michael Greger personally, and the good news is that the diet I'm on right now, the plant-based diet, is the absolute optimal diet for someone in my position. And I've been able to stay off. There was a flood in 2013 here, and I was on an antibiotic by IV with care nurses on a daily basis coming to see me. And our labs were backed up for 3 days. And I got a call from my nephrologist that said, you have to come to the hospital like now. And so I was too weak to get out of my pajamas. I thought it was just the antibiotic was making me tired and sleepy. And it turned out I was severely allergic to the 2 pediatric dose antibiotics I was being given.
Oh my gosh.
And I was down to 4% kidney functioning.
Oh
overall.
My goodness. Oh my goodness.
So now I'm up to 12 to 14%. And I've been able to hold my own for over 5 years like that with no dialysis or anything.
That's incredible.
So I want to say to people, this is not false hope. This is hope based on reality, based on hardcore science and evidence.
Right.
And, fingers crossed and continue eating this way. I hope to push off dialysis for as long as possible. Well,
you're a walking, talking miracle. So I would say if anybody can do it, you can, Kate. Now, I know you have a lot of people in the plant-based community that you admire and respect.
Yes.
Who would you say is 1 or 2 of your heroes in the community?
I would say, well, there's kind of the triple threat that there's so many people to admire, but the 2 by way of, if I was going to say by way of dietary guidelines that I follow very strictly, are Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn.
Yes.
He's very much of the approach that someone in their 40s or 50s should really be, avoiding the nuts, especially if they have any kind of heart disease, avocados, like higher plant fat foods. And Dr. John McDougall, I would say as well, in this starch, like way he looks at a plate, sort of 40-60 if you're trying to lose weight, 40% of the starch, 60% of veg. I just find him very practical, very down to earth. He allows everything to be open. And I keep thinking about the 40-some years that he's been doing this, and how when he was, I believe it was 17 years at a hospital, he never got one referral from the hospital themselves. It was always outside the hospital.
Wow.
No colleague referred anybody. They would go, he shared the story how they would go, it was St. Helena's Adventist Hospital, and they would maybe go sort of the back door, but they would never formally make a referral to him. And I kept thinking about how, wow, that must have been so discouraging at times, so frustrating, because it's like, and when I've noticed people, and I saw this in the addiction world. I did addiction counseling for a number of years and coordinated an entire counseling program for addiction studies. And when people become sober, they want to become counselors right away because they feel so wonderful. They're kind of honeymooning. And my guess right now, Kathleen, is you're kind of honeymooning as well.
You're right. And I'm 35 years sober too. Yeah, I've been in recovery for 35 years, so I know what you're talking about. It's that.
So they feel so excited about it. And
yes.
Feel like they have found, and they good with good reason. It's not false at all. However, we always end up hitting a kind of plateau, and we want to be prepared for that plateau because we get used to, believe it or not, we get used to feeling good, that it just feels ordinary and it doesn't feel good anymore.
Right.
And so that's why I say that, I've been doing this faithfully since December 1st of 2012. And I deliberately did it. That's when McDougall's program was, the beginning of December. And I said it was the perfect time. Because if I could get through Christmas, where there's a pass for everything, whether it's drinking or eating, you have a pass on everything during that month. Like it's like as if nobody, you know, nothing happens, so nothing exists except just pure pleasure. And I thought if I can get through that, and one of the things he said is, you know, give it a number of months so that you can really see the change.
Right.
And I think sometimes people, and I went into it like I had, as far as I was concerned, I had nothing to lose. I wasn't going to harm my body. I wasn't going to do anything. So I gave myself the date of April 8th when I first started. And I have to be honest, I went to bed. I normally did not dream of food, but I'd start dreaming of like a banana split or whatever it was. And I never did that before. But I realized that I was also a really poor cook. I was a kitchen klutz who could open a cardboard box, but ask me to cook a whole meal, that was a real challenge. That was intimidating. And so, but you know, came around, it got less and less those dreams, less and less that fascination. April 8th came around, my birthday came. I had no desire, because I had promised myself I could go off this plant-based thing. Right. And you know, and I had no desire to, because I felt so much better. Right, right. And I mean, I still wasn't able to exercise at that point. I couldn't exercise for another whole year almost. Oh my. Because of my weakness and everything. But I was like losing weight and everything. And then within 15 months later, I got my eyesight back. That's incredible. What a gift. After 5 years of being blind. Wow. That's incredible. You know, I can't believe it. I got to see my son graduate from university. Like, did you cry the whole time? I was just like, I was crying when I couldn't see him, and I was crying when I could see him. Right. Oh, that's a great story. That's a great story. Know, and so I say to people is like, sometimes you'll go through this honeymoon at first. Right. And you also, when you have that honeymoon feeling, you want to tell the whole world. You don't want to keep you know, that's what I'm trying to, yeah. It goes to show how generous people are, though. That's how I look at it. They're so generous that they don't want to keep it to themselves. They don't They want everybody to know. However, I found too, I said as a cautionary note to people who are just sort of in that beginning excitement, is to share, for example, as you asked me, who are the doctors that I rely on? If people get curious about what you're doing, say, well, these two doctors you might want to look up. Right. And then I find that's like a little bit of a litmus test, because then if they're really interested, they'll come back and ask you some questions. If they're not, it's like, you know, you haven't engaged in something that's going to pull you down. Right, right. You know, well, you're so spot on. Yes. You want to throw them a life ring. You don't want to be their life ring. Exactly. And I've had to pull myself back and rein myself in, because I get very passionate about things, and I borderline obsession with this whole thing. And that's one reason I'm bringing other people onto my YouTube show, because, which eventually this will turn into an iTunes show. But the thing that I realize is I'm not the expert. I happen to be a woman at the age of 64 who decided to go plant-based for health reasons. But I also do a lot of animal rescue, so it aligns with my compassion for animals. But I really have to be careful not to, it's like when I got sober 35 years ago, it's like everybody had to quit drinking. Everybody had to quit drugs. It's like, no, not everybody needs to, you know? And so for me, it's like, I really appreciate people like yourself being willing to share your story, so that I can step back and let you tell what the truth is based on years of experience rather than just a few months. So, well, I think that my background, having worked in the field of addictions for many, many years, has also helped me. I was never myself. I was a non-drinker my whole life. But I certainly walked through it with people, both as a nurse and in specialing them, where they were coming off drugs and everything. Right. That was quite disturbing. Yes. And but also as a counselor. And I think that what it did is allowed me to temper my excitement, because I realized that my passion might not be someone else's at that moment. Right. However, I think there's something about planting seeds. by sharing quietly, if people ask and answer sincerely your questions, they may not go for it now, but at least you've all of a sudden planted a seed in them that maybe it'll be a reference point for them in the future. Because, most people can get by with life, for example, not drinking alcohol. And and I would say that most people need to get by in life by not consuming animal products just because of the health concerns.
Correct.
It's a little bit like, when people say, well, it was okay for my grandparents, whatever. I say, yeah, but so were no seatbelts at that time. Well, we had less cars on the road. We had less injuries. Now we have new information. Would you only choose to wear your seatbelt on Mondays, Thursdays, and Sundays? Or would you want to do it every day? Would you be willing to gamble that way?
Right.
And so we forget that. The same with smoking. No one intends to, I don't mind if I get cancer. They get hooked on it for a number of different reasons. Sometimes it's a bit of social status. It's like, I want to belong. It's, it may be a relief for them to meditate their anxiety. And then all of a sudden they found themselves in this horrible kind of cycle of addiction of I can't get off them. And so it's a matter of that. And I don't think we've really hit totally the whole aspect of addiction of the sugar, salt kind of thing that we can get trapped
Absolutely.
And it's with us 24 hours a day too.
It is in so many different things that we consume. If there was only one book that you could recommend to somebody who is interested in exploring a plant-based whole food lifestyle, which book would that be?
Wow, that is a tough one because I've had a lot of different books. Gee, you've almost got me stumped there on that one. The one book that, believe it or not, one book that comes to mind for someone who just wants to kind of just begin exploring this, it's a very small book. It's written by Hicks. It's called Four Leaf.
Four Leaf.
You can actually go on the website Four Leaf. It's Four Leaf Program, and they have a survey there. So anybody in your reading audience could go and look at that survey. It's a downloadable survey, and you can even just do it online, and then they'll give you the results, but you can also print it off and do it yourself. And what's so nice about the survey is it can also be used as kind of a tool to kind of go, oh, these are the gaps I'm missing, because they use the four leaves. I was first introduced to it through the Cornell University course. And they were introducing it there through T. Colin Campbell's program. Right. And I thought that was really, really helpful. And I just thought it really gives people a kind of a barometer of where to head. They might be at one leaf and the goal is to get to four leaf.
Okay. Four leaf. I'll put that in the description also. And now you got certified through the
I have a number of different qualifications because, like you, I've been very enthusiastic.
That's putting it lightly for me.
I'm a certified Food for Life instructor with Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine.
Okay.
And then I also got my Starch Solution certificate holder from John McDougall. I'm a graduate with them. I did a number of courses through the Cleveland Clinic through Dr. Esselstyn. He had smaller courses. I've taken the T. Colin Campbell plant-based nutrition program. Nice. And I also did, he doesn't offer it now, but it was Nutrition of a Healthy Heart. It was another course of his. I've also taken the Ruby cooking course online. That was really helpful on plant-based nutrition. Yeah. Okay. So those ones.
Well, you've definitely, you've earned your stripes. You're doing some phenomenal things. I'm so glad that we connected. And thank you so much for sharing with the community about what they can do to literally turn their health around.
And one of the strong things I just would like to end on is that there is a need, we have a basic need to belong. Right. So just like oxygen and water and light and shelter. We need, and so what I've done is I've created a small potluck kit so that people can purchase for a very small price online, and it takes you through how to look for a venue, everything, even right down to the menu cards that you can give, so that you can create your own community. It can start out in the church basement, it can start out in someone's home. And because we really do need to be surrounded. Now, John McDougall will say it a little bit more reality therapist way. He will go, well, just make new friends. But most of us want to keep some of our old friends.
Absolutely.
But also like them to be around for a while when we see how perhaps they were eating like we used to be eating.
Right, right.
We'd really like them to realize that, guess what? Sometimes what we can do is people might be more interested in not sort of going on another, what they see as diet, but crowding out foods that aren't helpful to them in their life, that don't love them back.
Right.
So that, you know, you have a little less cheese, so you're crowding it out and you're going to replace it with something else.
Right, right.
If we ask someone to give up something, we need to help them find something to replace it with.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, where can people get this potluck kit?
Yeah, it's on the forksmart.org website under our store. And so that's available as well.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure that all those links are put in the description of this video. And I so appreciate what you're doing. I'm so glad and grateful that we connected. And I look forward to getting to know you better and knowing you for many years to come.
Well,
Thank you so much.
That's exciting. Yeah. Well, we'll both be hopefully alive and well to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful day.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye.